What if they are actually better at it? The very first thing they do is not riot. Is that the problem was never really the guards versus the prisoners? Except with better breakfast hours and unlocked law libraries. They use the exact same language that prison reform advocates have been using for years to argue against the existing system. So somebody, somewhere, at some point in their life, sat down and thought, you know what would fix the prison system? And then immediately answered themselves with, letting the prisoners run it. And nobody stopped them. Nobody pulled them aside and said, bro, have you eaten today? Have you had water? Are you okay? Nobody. The idea just kept going. And now here we are actually thinking about it. Because honestly, it is way more interesting than it has any right to be. For real bro here, where we say what no one else will. Shh. Because here is the thing nobody is asking. What if they are actually better at it? What if 24 hours of prisoner-run prison reveals something so uncomfortable about how we built this system that the people running it right now would rather you never find this out? Stay with me, because we are going somewhere wild. Part 1. The morning announcement nobody was ready for. Picture this. It is 6 in the morning. The guards have handed over the keys. The keys, plural, to the entire facility, and they are standing outside the gate, probably regretting every single life decision that led to this moment. While inside the prison, a man named Darnell, who has been incarcerated for 11 years, is now holding a clipboard and staring at the daily schedule like he is the new regional manager of a very specific kind of office building. And the first thing he does is cancel breakfast at 5:45 in the morning. Just like that, gone. Because who decided that breakfast should happen at 5:45 in the morning? Some guy in 1987 who hated other people. That is who. And Darnell, who has had 11 years to think about this, is moving it to 8. Like a normal human being. Like someone who understands that sleep exists. And here's the first twist you did not see coming. The moment the prisoners are in charge, the very first thing they do is not riot. It is not chaos. It is not revenge. It is sleep. They sleep in. They eat at a reasonable hour. They stop the inhumane scheduling that has been going on for decades and was always presented as necessary for order. Necessary for whose order? Because the guys who actually live there just fixed it in 45 minutes. And that right there should make you deeply uncomfortable. Because what it means is that some of the cruelty was never about safety. It was just cruelty dressed up in clipboard language. And now you cannot unknow that. But wait. Because the morning is still young, and Darnell's clipboard is about to create its own set of problems that nobody predicted. Part 2. The golden hours. When everyone is surprisingly nice and also very suspicious. Here is something genuinely fascinating about human psychology. When you give someone responsibility over the thing they have been complaining about, they immediately become deeply invested in not letting it fall apart. Like every person who has ever complained about their job and then panicked the one day they had to actually run it. By 9 in the morning, the prisoner-run prison has organized itself. And not in a chaotic way. In a very specific, very structured way. Because it turns out that people who live in an institution for years develop extremely detailed opinions about how it should work. They know which guard is unnecessarily aggressive. They know which rule exists for safety and which rule exists to make someone feel powerful. They know the difference between structure and punishment. And they immediately start applying that knowledge. The yard gets opened up properly. Not the 30-minute version, a real yard period. Education rooms get unlocked. The law library, which is technically always available but always somehow never actually available, suddenly has people in it voluntarily. People are studying, teaching each other. A guy who used to be an electrician before he came in is explaining wiring diagrams to 3 other guys who are listening like their lives depend on it. And this is the part that is genuinely beautiful and also the part that will quietly wreck you. Because these are not suddenly better people, they are the same people, in the same building, with slightly different keys, and they built something that looked more humane in 4 hours than the standard system did in 4 decades. But then lunch arrives. And lunch is where everything starts to quietly crack. Because it turns out that when you give people freedom, someone always decides that freedom means they specifically do not have to wait in line. And the guy who skipped the line happens to be the exact person that 4 other people have a very complicated history with. And now the Board of Prisoner Governors has its first official dispute, and there are no guards. And everyone is watching. And Darnell's clipboard is not going to save him here. You thought this was going to stay nice, did you not? Part 3. The afternoon when the real prison started showing up. Here is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Not because things fall apart, because they almost do not. And the reason they almost hold it together reveals something absolutely terrible about human nature that nobody talks about at dinner parties. By early afternoon, factions have formed. Not gangs in the dramatic movie sense. More like committees, which is somehow more unsettling. There is a committee for cell assignments, a committee for yard time allocation, and a committee for resolving disputes. And these committees are making decisions with a speed and confidence that would embarrass most actual governments. But here is the prediction break. You assumed that without authority, people would become chaotic. What actually happens is that people become extremely authoritarian about the things they care about. The prisoners running the prison start enforcing rules with the same iron certainty as the guards they spent years resenting. The guy who was furious about unfair cell searches is now the most aggressive enforcer of the new cell territory agreements. The guy who hated arbitrary punishments has invented 3 new arbitrary punishments by 2 in the afternoon. And this is the moment the whole thing gets genuinely philosophical. Because what it reveals is that the problem was never really the guards versus the prisoners. The problem is what happens to any human being when you give them power over other human beings, and then tell them they have to maintain order. The impulse toward control is not a guard thing. It is not a uniform thing. It is a people thing. And it shows up embarrassingly fast. By 3 in the afternoon, the prisoner-run prison looks structurally almost identical to the regular prison, except with better breakfast hours and unlocked law libraries, which is actually a significant improvement. But it is not the revolution anyone imagined at 6 in the morning. And this is where Darnell, standing in the middle of the yard with his clipboard, starts to look like a man who just realized something he cannot take back. Part 4. The evening revelation that will mess you up a little. Okay, here is the most uncomfortable thing in this entire experiment. Are you ready? Because you are going to argue about this in the comments, and I already know it. By evening, a small group of prisoners has quietly decided that certain people in the facility deserve extra punishment. Not official punishment. Unofficial punishment. The kind that happens when you have community authority and a personal grudge and no oversight. And the 3 men who make this decision are not bad people in some dramatic movie villain sense. They are people who have been genuinely wronged, repeatedly, systematically, and who now have 5 minutes of power and a list of names. And the rest of the prisoner council has to stop them. And this is the moment that breaks your brain a little. Because they do stop them. The majority of the prisoner council refuses. They shut it down. They cite fairness. They cite the danger of using power for personal scores. They use the exact same language that prison reform advocates have been using for years to argue against the existing system. Prisoners running a prison, upholding the principle of fair treatment against revenge. And nobody was filming it. Nobody will put it in a documentary. It will never be cited in a congressional hearing. But it happened. In a hypothetical that everyone was sure would end in chaos by noon. The thing that saved the experiment from collapsing into cruelty was ordinary human decency, making an unglamorous decision in an ugly hallway. And also Darnell and his clipboard. He deserves some credit, but there is still one final truth nobody saw coming. And it is waiting at midnight. Part 5. What midnight revealed that changes the entire point. Here is the theory reveal. And I need you to stay with me because this one is going to rearrange some furniture in your head. At midnight, when the guards returned and took back the keys, the prisoners were asked one question by a researcher observing the experiment. The question was simple. What was the hardest part? And almost universally, across every facility where versions of this experiment have been studied in some form, the answer was not the disputes. It was not the violence that almost happened. It was not the logistics or the fruit or the factions. The hardest part was making decisions that hurt someone for the good of the group. The hardest part was realizing that some rules exist not because anyone is evil, but because without them, you slide towards something worse. The hardest part was understanding from the inside why the people who ran the place made some of the choices they made. Not all of them. Not the cruelty, not the 5:45 breakfasts, but some of them. And here's what that actually means. The prisoners did not run the prison and conclude that freedom is the answer. They ran the prison and concluded that the answer is something more specific and more human and more annoying. Fairness requires effort. Order requires buy-in from the people being ordered. And a system that does not have that buy-in will always spend more energy maintaining itself than it ever produces in outcomes. Which is also a perfect description of most companies, most governments, most relationships, and most group chats with more than 6 people. So congratulations. You came here for a prison thought experiment and you accidentally learned something about every institution you have ever been part of. The hook was about prisoners. The point was about you. You did not see that coming at 6 in the morning, did you? Neither did Darnell. And here's the callback nobody asked for. Remember breakfast? The one thing Darnell changed first, before anything else, before any system, before any committee, was the time that people got to eat in the morning. That one human instinct. Give people back some basic dignity and they will build something. That instinct showed up first, before the politics, before the politics, before the complicated evening in the hallway. The first act of power was a small act of care, which might be the most human thing in this entire story. Now drop a comment below with the one rule you would change first if you were Darnell with a clipboard for 24 hours. And be specific. Generic answers are cowardly and I will read them in that voice. Also, if you watched this far and still have not subscribed, I respect the commitment to being difficult. That is actually very on brand for this channel. We will see you in the next one. For real, bro.